Good afternoon, everybody. It's a sunny day here in Devon by the coast, hence my summery attire. And I'm delighted to have Alex Groundwater, also known, actually anointed by you guys as Housing Stig, hence the
Afternoon, Charlie.
It's 5 Fact Friday. I'm Charlie Lambden. This is Moving Home with Charlie. And every week we go through the 5 most significant pieces of news that you can verify yourself and check up on in the last 7 days that I think are most significant for the housing market. Now, just before we get into it, as I tweeted earlier today, one of the pieces of data that came out today, which I'm amazed more people haven't cottoned on to, is actually the first time that I've seen a piece of data that makes me go, actually, that's causing me to rethink how I feel about my 35% price fall expectations over the 3-year or whatever it is slide. And I haven't had this discussion with Alex off camera, so we're going to be having this discussion on camera once we've gone through the 5 facts of the week. But I mean, for me personally, something about this particular piece of data sort of hit quite hard as like, someone wasn't expecting that. Now, it could be a blip or not. We'll come on to that in a minute. But first of all, let's whistle through the 5 facts, starting with a piece of rare good news. Hang on a second. As usual, I'm not ready. Here we have, let me just get up on the screen. They've actually squeezed in, and many of you will have heard of this, the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Bill becomes law, and that was squeezed in just before Parliament was dissolved for the election. And there is actually a significant amount of good news in this, and this is genuinely amazing news for leasehold owners, even though they didn't get a lot of things done that they wanted to get done. And I just want to quickly skim through some of the things that the Act, which is now passed and become law, means for leasehold owners. So it's going to make it cheaper and easier for people to extend their lease or buy their freehold. Hang on a second, where's that gone? Why is that not sharing? One moment, sorry. There we go. Excuse me, sorry, here we are. Right, there we are. Okay, and I've linked this below. It's actually, there's a link to my website that's got all of the links to these sources, so you can and should go and read this for yourself if you are a leaseholder. Cheaper and easier to extend their lease or buy their freeholder. That's great. That should have an impact on the values of some of these properties. Increasing the standard lease extension term to 990 years, up from 50 and 90 years for houses and flats respectively. So leaseholders can enjoy secure ownership without the hassle and expense of future lease extensions. Cool. Greater transparency over service charges. Great. I mean, it just makes it easy to scrutinize and challenge them, but it doesn't stop or cap service charges, but it will create greater transparency. And transparency, as we all know, is a good thing. Easier and cheaper for leaseholders to take over management of their building, allowing them to appoint the managing agent of their choice. I mean, there is actually, Alex, I think, some very, very good news in here for leaseholders.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, without a doubt. Well, let's face it, leaseholders absolutely needed it.
Yeah, and no longer have to pay freeholders' costs when making an enfranchisement rights claim, extending, so blah, it goes on and on, right? And it's good. It's good. It's not perfect. It's still, leaseholds are still not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but this is a significant step in the right direction. It's a significant pushback against some of the unfair rights that freeholders have. And so therefore, unless you're a freeholder, this is brilliant news.
Yeah.
So that's great. That's fact number 1 for this week. Fact number 2, Nationwide released its house price index this morning. Modest rebound in house price growth in May as market shows resilience. And they're saying that the monthly index, so the monthly change was up 0.4% month on month in May, and the annual change has gone up from 0.6% last month to annual growth of 1.3%. Alex, I've got a question for you. If the price of my house has gone up by 1.3%,
Yep.
What's the value of my house gone up by in the last 12 months?
You mean taking inflation into account?
Yes.
it
Yes.
has reduced.
What?
Yes, you know this, Charlie.
What?
You wind up merchant. Yeah, it will have fallen by, I don't know, 10%.
In a year?
Yeah, I think so. God,
No,
I can do the
listen,
maths.
no, don't write the number. But what I'm saying is, are you telling me that inflation, this thing that's just been a bit of a blindside slap in the face for a lot of people who never really understood inflation until the last couple of years, are you saying that inflation actually affects the value of my house?
Well, it affects what you could buy other than another house with the cash that you take out of your house should you release equity or sell it to downsize or to use it for healthcare, for instance, if you were elderly and needing care.
Cool. Now, listen, I'm not using this to argue that house prices are falling when they're rising nationwide. I'm just trying to get the point across to people that you really need to understand that just because the notional price tag value of your house may have gone up, it doesn't mean you're richer. That's the point.
No, absolutely. And that's why we've all felt poorer for such a long time after 2008.
And it's also a factor to take into consideration when buying a house, thinking that it's going to be your pension or investment of some kind.
Absolutely.
Because if inflation is going to be a bit higher for longer, then even if house prices are going up 5% every year, but inflation is still at 3% every year, you're only going up 2% a year, which might not be enough to meet your investment targets. But there we are. So that's nationwide. There's no big news here. I think they went nationwide went down the previous 2 months a little bit month on month. They've gone up this month on month. But one of the things nationwide does not tell us is the size of their sample. So it's difficult to know exactly, and also whether there's a geographical bias and that kind of stuff, which we know that there is between Nationwide and Halifax. And one of them includes buy-to-let mortgages and one of them doesn't. So it's not comparing apples and apples. But anyway, that's fact number 2. Nationwide reports UK house prices rose 0.4% month on month in May. Annual growth rate picked up 1.3%. Now that's, again, average for the country, and it won't reflect regional variations. Speaking of which, regional variations. Zoopla also put their monthly house price index out this week, yesterday, in fact, I think it was. And Alex, there's some really interesting stuff in here. I haven't noticed them put this PDF out before. This came out yesterday, and I've linked to this PDF for all of you. Now, it's just 0 minus 0.1% for annual UK house price inflation. It's such a meaningless number because it's the average of England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, and it's the average of all different property types. And it's the average of averages of averages, right? It really is. Now, having said that, I'm really impressed and actually sort of heartened by the amount of detail they've gone into this month about variations from the average regionally and by property type. So big thumbs up to Zoopla for this. But in these headline figures here, a 13% year-on-year change in sales agreed. Okay, that's not news. That's typical with what's been reported already. Rightmove reported a similar amount. This time last year, sales agreed was very, very low. So it's not a surprise that they're going up, and it's good news that they're going up, right? This number caught me, Alex. The value of homes for sale versus last year is up 25%. The total combined cumulative value of a housing stock up 25%.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And to me, what that shows is that not only are there more properties coming in the market, which is one of the big headlines in Zoopla's index this month, but also it suggests to me more higher value properties coming to the market.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a possibility.
Right. At a city level, price inflation ranges from minus 3% in Ipswich to plus 3.6% in Belfast. There are more homes for sale than at any point in the last 8 years, up 20% year on year in number terms and 25% higher in value terms. More supply boosts choice and will keep price inflation in check. So this is good news if you're a buyer because you've got more choice. It makes it slightly harder to sell because you're competing against more sellers, obviously.
Yeah.
The north-south divide in house price inflation is set to remain. That's a really important point. There's no official data on this, but it's quite clear that there is a big difference in north and south. And we'll look at their map in a minute as well. I wanted to skip down to guys. You can all go and read this, and I recommend you do genuinely. So the record high number of homes for sale per estate agent office is 31. Sales are up, but not as much as new supply. That suggests, I mean, this flies in the face of the fact that Nationwide says house prices are going up, of course. But I think we've got to slice and dice it into relevant sort of subsections to understand this. Because everyone watching this who's moving house, and by the way, if you're not moving house and you're watching this, I don't know why you're watching this. This is a home movers channel, but a lot of you watch this who aren't home movers. The notable trend is that the number of homes for sale has grown faster than the increase in sales agreed. So this is an interesting graph here, which shows that, so that the black line is homes for sale and the purple line is sales agreed. So only the northeast and the northwest are bucking the trend. Everywhere else, look at Wales. Oh dear, Wales in the middle there. There are more homes coming to the market than there are going under offer. And the other graph I wanted to show you is this one. Now, I posted about this a couple of days ago. This is the variation in annual house price, year-on-year house price growth at a city level. And Ipswich there nearly -3%, Belfast at +3.5%. Otherwise, it's Burnley, which is about 2.5%, is the highest city year-on-year average. But that is still averaging out all property types. It doesn't separate houses and flats, etc. But that graph is the strongest visual illustration I've yet seen of how asking what's happening in, quotes, the housing market is an unanswerable question.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's different everywhere. And that graph really shows a housing market tale of two halves, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Really, really does.
With a zero in the middle, and that's, you look at the balance on it.
Yeah. And the point I'm trying to make here is when you see national headline house price figures, just remember this graph, right? Because the zero in the middle, that's what Zoopla said, is that the annual house price inflation is 0 minus 0.1%. Not one of those cities on there, except perhaps York, is at 0 minus 0.1%. Every other city is a different value.
Yeah.
So that 0 minus 0.1% is a meaningless number for almost everyone.
Where's London? I can't read it. It's a bit small for me.
It's here. It's about minus 0.8%. But again, there's massive divergence between houses and flats in London. Massive. So they actually say elections normally lead to increased uncertainty and some stalling in market activity. I really like how honest Zoopla is being here, because Rightmove's gone, we don't expect there to be any stalling in market activity. It's all going to be fine. But Zoopla's actually being, I think, much less guffy than most of the industry, and I welcome that. I really do. This is an interesting fact. Currently, 392,000 homes in the sales pipeline, working their way through to completion over 2024. 392,000 sales agreed. That's an interesting number. It's roughly a third of a typical year. It's more than a third of this year, of the current annual totals, which would reflect the longer transaction time. Now, what it says, we don't expect to see buyers already in the process of progressing to sales pulling out. Not quite. I'd love to know why they think that, because that's not what I'm seeing or hearing. There are some people buying out. And we've got finally the nationwide graph here, and you can just see it's green in the north and it's red in the south, basically. But what's interesting is our friend on Twitter, James Twallin, Otter Property, he's got southeast areas down 5% year on year.
Yes, because he's using the land registry averages. He's
Yeah.
actually using the sold price.
Yeah. And it's worth reminding everyone that Zoopla's index is a unique calculation combining asking prices, sold prices, and everything in between. They do have access to a huge amount of different kind of data, so it is interesting, but also it's perhaps oversimplifying what's happening, I think.
Yeah, and I'd really recommend for people interested, go and have a look at the Otter property tool, OTTA, that James has put together. It's James Twallin, TWALLIN. A great tool.
Otter, OTTA.property. It is interesting. Yeah, you've got to spend some time with it to get your head around it, but it is very interesting, and it shows the sample sizes, which I find amazing. I mean, the sample sizes have just been trending smaller and smaller and smaller over the last 12 months.
Land registry are atrocious.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's that. That's fact number 3. Now here, let's get on to the 4th one. Fact number 4. I'm just going to. There's something I want to say before we bring this next fact up. Many times when we've talked about Bank of England stats, I have gone, well, there's seasonally adjusted and there's non-seasonally adjusted, and it's always worth looking at both. Right? I've always said it's always worth looking at both, and people get very excited about the seasonally adjusted number and ignore the non-seasonally adjusted number. And I think the only sensible thing to do if you really want to know what's happening is to actually take a look at both. And I've always said that the actual number to me makes more sense when you're looking at month-on-month changes. Now, what we're about to show you is really surprising to me, and it goes against what I've been saying for a long time. First of all, right, let's bring up the seasonally adjusted number, the number that everyone normally goes, "Oh, Charlie, you should use the seasonally adjusted number because that one that tells you everything's okay and use it. You just use it, okay, Charlie, use it." This is the seasonally adjusted number. And I'm just going to make a quite a heavy point here, right? This is today's Bank of England seasonally adjusted data number, and it's showing that between March and April, it's basically unchanged. There are like 180 more, literally just 180 more mortgages approved in April than there were in May. 61,000, 61,000. Actually less, sorry, it's less. It's gone down slightly. Seasonally adjusted has gone very, very slightly down.
Yeah.
I'm amazed not more people have gone and looked at the non-seasonally adjusted, because it blows what I've been saying and thinking for a while out of the water. The actual number was 67,000, 67,500, which makes it the highest number of new purchase mortgages approved since just before the mini budget. 67,000 just in September 2022. That's the last time it was this high. So this is the highest figure since before the mini budget of mortgage approvals. Okay, so to all of you who accuse me of always covering up and always trying to make it go my way, I'm not. I'm very, very happy always to look at what's actually happening, and this is cold, hard, as far as we know, gospel fact data. Right? This is actually it's not completions, is it? It's approvals.
Correct.
And I'm still slightly unclear about what the time delay in this is. And so I don't know if this is a blip or not. And this is what I want to discuss with Alex just when we've done the last fact. But I need some time to process this, zoom out, look at the wider picture and the other factors involved here. But it's possible that this is a slightly delayed reading of what we all know was a pickup in activity in the first quarter of this year. But I don't know, because I don't know. I looked on the Bank of England website and I couldn't find the timings of this. Now, if this is actually data that was approved actually in April, mortgage approvals in April, then that's strong. I mean, that is strong. But the question I asked Alex off camera, and I'll come back to this in a second, Alex. Let's just get the last fact, number 5, out of the way, and then we'll come back to this discussion. Okay.
Okay.
So fact number 5 is that, and the reason I think this is relevant is because, hang on a second. So this is Reuters a few hours ago. Eurozone inflation rises. It's gone up in a fresh signal for ECB caution. So there is a relationship of some kind between the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve in the United States and the ECB in Europe. And this has surprised me because I've never had an opinion about what the main Eurozone inflation is going to do. I haven't watched it. It doesn't concern me. But I have noticed that the story on that has generally been European inflation is definitely coming down. European rates are definitely going to come down. And I haven't had an opinion or stated this, but it's actually gone up. So it was 2.4% last month. It's gone up to 2.6% year on year. And they're saying that means that the prospect of rate cuts by the ECB are now lower. Again, why do I cite that? Because I do think for people who are hanging on every bit of news about interest rates, it further lessens the chance of a Bank of England rate cut, which is all. I mean, any potential Bank of England base rate cut has already been pushed to September, as far as the markets are concerned. That's what the markets are pricing in. So the earliest rate cut is expected in September. And the whole of this year, the market's expectations have proved to be over-optimistic. And I don't see any reason that's going to change yet. And with these kind of readings, I think it's just going to make it even more pessimistic. Now, yesterday, mortgage lenders put rates up a small amount. It wasn't covered by the news. Mortgage rates aren't dropping. And so we've got all of these mixed signals. Mortgage rates have been ticking up quietly for the last couple of months, just ticking up, ticking up, ticking up. Properties for sale have been increasing. We've now got the highest for 8 years. So these indicators are sort of saying actually it's overall negative pressure on house prices. But then today's Bank of England data goes boom. No house price. Now, in the long term, it's worth going back and looking at the long term graph on mortgage approvals to get context. And so the peak there is in 2021, like May or June 2021. That was 108,000 mortgage approvals. So we are still way, way, way below that peak. But it stayed at 190, 80, 70, 70. You know, it's been, and then it dropped below 60,000 after the mini budget and hasn't got back up there until now. This is the wrong one. That's the seasonally adjusted one. Here we are. This is the actuals. 105,000 nearly. Right, dropped briefly below 60,000 in December 2021. Otherwise, it stayed above it. So now, but look at that. That's showing what are we? 1, 2, 3 months of rises now.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of people, Alex, who would be very, very happy to see me eat my words.
Oh, well.
Not tasting very nice, eating my own words. But I am at the point now, and I like to be as open and transparent as I can. People have asked me non-stop, when are you going to rethink your position on 35% expectations over 3 years? And every time I'm asked, I think about it, go, no, still the same. Have things taken longer than I expected? Yes. Do I think it changes the overall long-term outlook? No. But today's news is the first time it's actually gone, something feels different about this. And I want to know what you thought. Do you think this feels a bit different?
Yes. Can I graph you?
Yeah, please do. Love it.
Right. So I have been confused for some time as to why things are not progressing. Can you see that? Excellent, as you might expect. So what you've got here is going back to 2011 savings. This is all types of savings, so cash, non-interest bearing, interest bearing, sight and time, and ISAs, cash ISAs. And what you can see from 2011 all the way through until the beginning of COVID was that we saved as a country at exactly the same rate. Oh, where did that go? Sorry, wrong one. At exactly the same rate. In fact, there was a 0.9953 correlation. Then COVID came along. People were locked down. They weren't allowed to go out, so they couldn't spend. They had furlough money, and our savings just grew massively. And people have been speculating as to when they're going to run out. So I created a pretty simple polynomial function, which tracked with a very close, and it got as high as 0.99 at one point, about here, as to when they'd run out. And originally, they looked like they would run out, or we would go back to our trend line. We would intersect our trend line in March of 24. But I hadn't factored in quite. Sorry?
March 24 or March 25?
March 24.
Okay.
So here, if you follow this curve, it would have gone like that.
Right.
But what I hadn't factored in was quite how willing the banks would be to offer decent savings rates. Normally, they're very slow on that, but actually they started to offer much higher interest rate accounts. And people like MS&I offered bonds that you could purchase with a 6.4% lock-in. So actually, people's savings have been growing. And when I say people, I mean a relatively small subsection of society. So it's more the older generation that already had money who have benefited from the interest rates, rather than younger generation who are a little hit by the cost of living. But from February of this year, if you look at that graph, it's gone completely off trend. If you did this graph in January, the crossover was still January of 25. But in the last 3 months, people's savings have gone through the roof. Now,
it's the downsizers. It's the downsizers taking their money out of the housing market.
There you go. So I have a couple of theories. One, of course, is that bonuses are paid in March, and that will have a big impact. Also, people who'd locked money into time deposits may have realized that in March because of the tax year. People put more money into ISAs and so on and so forth.
Did you see the ISA figure? Because the ISA figure was off the scale this month.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the people are using their tax-free allowance. They don't want to get hit with that tax. But again, people who hold ISAs is a relatively small number of the population. We are increasing that divide between rich and poor. But it's just been the last 3 months, there's been this huge increase. So what does that mean across the rest of the economy? Here, we've got credit card debt. And you can see that up until 2018, we had a pretty standard increase. And you can see this, you can spot the spikes, which were always December when people were buying. That spike has now changed to November because everyone's buying online, which is why high streets are decimated. But they brought in new regulations in 2018, and actually credit card spending flatlined. And then we had COVID. And people paid back a vast amount. 16 billion pounds of credit card debt was paid back. But since April of 21, we've had the fastest acceleration in credit card debt that we've had going back over 20 years.
Right.
And at this rate, we're going to intersect with our original 2018 to 2020 line in January of 25. But what we've done already is put another 14 billion onto balances. It's a scary amount. And so, although there are people who are saving a lot of money, there are people who are borrowing a lot on credit card. And you go, if you were savvy, you wouldn't be wanting the interest rates on a credit card whilst saving at the same time. So again, it suggests a divide. And here's the interesting one for mortgages. Mortgage borrowing. This is how much was lent to people to purchase houses, just house purchase mortgages. Sorry, all mortgages on dwellings. Apologies, all mortgages on dwellings.
Okay.
So from 15 all the way through until 20, it was a pretty linear thing. You can see that blue line, 9971 correlation. Then, again, in the same way as savings, during lockdown and the stamp duty holiday, people went bang, and actually mortgage borrowing increased dramatically. What you've seen for the last 18 months is unprecedented, going back, and I've looked back now over 40 years. At no point has mortgage borrowing ever flatlined. It's always increased. But our overall outstanding mortgage debt, we are paying back mortgages at exactly the same rate that we're borrowing them at the moment. And again, there's only one group of people who will be paying back at that rate, and I don't think it's the people in their early 30s or even early 40s. But they've kept it. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here listening.
Oh, I've got a reload message. They've kept it so that there is no additional borrowing, which must be upsetting the banks no end.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was nationwide, so they're 20% down on their lending in a year.
Yep. Oh yeah, on the amount they're lending, their net lending is dramatically down. It's negative.
Yeah.
For some of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a wider look at the non-seasonally adjusted mortgage approvals. You
Yeah.
were looking only at 2 years. I've gone all the way back to 2000.
Okay.
Now, this is quarterly, non-seasonally adjusted. So you can see what happened between 2000 and 2008. You know, we were averaging over 100,000 mortgage approvals a month. Where we're at now, and bear in mind this April of 67,484 approvals, puts us almost on a par with where we were between 15 and 19 in terms of number of approvals.
Okay.
It's about the same. Obviously much lower than 21 and 22, but pretty much the same as it was previously. Whereas if you went back before February, I mean, all you've got to do is go back to a quarter, and we were all the way down at the same level that we were between 9 and 13 before Help to Buy. So it is literally the last 3 months, something has happened. Now, there's nothing fundamental in the economy.
That trend line for the last year or so, or the last 2 years, has been very steeply down, and it has now broken trend.
Correct.
Yeah.
And if we look at the average amount approved per house, so for every approval, you can see again, even from 2000, 2008, it was a standard line. Then you drop. Then you've got a pretty standard trend with a little uptick from 21, 22. You know, that's obviously an acceleration.
Yeah.
And then it's fallen and fallen and fallen. And again, just in the last quarter, bang.
Yeah.
It's just that last 3 or 4 months. Now we're still 4.5% nominally down on where we were at the peak, which was Q4 of 22.
Yeah.
Sorry, Q2 of 22 was the peak approval value, which then translated into actual purchases in Q3. And we're 4.5% down. But at one point, we were substantially lower than that. If you went back to March of 23, we were over £30,000 down, whereas now we're only £11,000 down.
Right.
So it's difficult to know exactly what's going to happen going forwards. I expect May and June, I expect the euphoria from bonuses to have worn off, and May and June numbers to actually come down a little. But we'll still see this trend coming close to where we were between 14 and 19. How people are affording it, I have no idea. Wage increases have been unexpectedly high, and maybe they will continue. But bankruptcies are also increasing. We're in a really, it's a very difficult market to call at the moment.
Yeah, it really does feel like the haves and the have-nots, doesn't it? It really does feel like that. And I mean, I think, you know, I know anecdotally of many downsizers who downsized to release money to help family buy property. Right. So there are and this is what's causing. I think you can divide the housing market up geographically. You can divide it up by property type, and you can divide it up by value band. Okay, because they will vary in the country as well. And the downsizing that I suspected, in my mind now, there's no doubt that's been happening, and that's why you're seeing more and more high value properties coming in the market. And there is more and more coming up for sale as more and more people come to the end of their fixed rates, etc. That's happening. Yes, I share your surprise about the tenacity of buyers, and actually, maybe it's a credit to the new home builders and agents who are succeeding in keeping people overpaying. Honestly, I think, in fact, I know a lot of that happens, despite our best efforts. But actually, if it's the market doing what the market does,
Yeah, not much you can do about that.
and the market does what the market does, and that's fine. I've never had a problem with that. But my just deep in my gut, when I put together all of my own data points of many different types, shapes, sizes, kinds, some of them actual data, some of them anecdotal, some of them pure woo-woo hippie gut feel. It just overall to me feels like what you and I have been expecting for a long time is just being staved off.
Yes.
And I really mean staved off. I mean, like it's being fought off. People are going to whatever lengths. I mean, the whole corporate real estate bubble. How has that not imploded?
Oh God.
How the fuck has that not imploded yet? I mean, that's just. I
Don't understand it.
I mean, it cannot be anything other than people going, mark to market when? I don't know. I haven't been paying attention to my diary. Let's not talk about when we're supposed to do that. That's one thing that's astonishing. I understand, and you correctly predicted stock markets would climb and climb and climb and climb.
Before they crash and crash and crash and crash.
Yeah.
That's not. I'm not suggesting. Sorry, not financial advice. Stock markets are not going to climb indefinitely. I think I put a cap at 9,000, didn't I? Where I said I wouldn't be totally surprised if it got to 9K. But bear in mind that was 2 years ago, and I haven't run the numbers again. But it just can't keep going at this rate.
And I remember you saying a couple of years ago to me privately. I don't know why I remember this particular comment. I remember you saying, people and companies and governments will cling on with their nails until the very bitter end.
Of course.
Just cling and cling. And so it feels like there's a lot of clinging going on. There is a large demographic of people who are swimming in cash going, don't know what this is all about. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I'm holding gold. I'm holding Bitcoin. That really helps.
You're going to get trolled so hard again now.
I hold Bitcoin. I have Bitcoin. I just can't find it, but I do have some somewhere.
I need to tell you a story at some point, not now, about a stag party I went on and the real meaning of Bitcoin.
Okay, not now. Not now. Definitely not now. It feels like we're going through a very major shift, a change. I mean, whether it's politically, economically, socially, demographically, the record immigration levels we're getting, Britain is changing. There's no single part of it that isn't changing, whether you like it or not. It's all changing. And I think when you're in a state of flux like this, a state of a lot of things changing, it's very, very difficult to get a good reading on what's really happening. But I mean, in terms of the overall long-term direction, I still, I mean, maybe despite rising unemployment, maybe despite rising company failures, I get so many people messaging me saying my industry is absolutely stuffed. There are no jobs to work. And by the way, this is one of the facts I wanted to present today in today's 5 Fact Friday, was that the chief executive of Adzuna, which is the company that provides the ONS with online job vacancies data, was interviewed on the Today program on Radio 4 one morning this week. And I remember listening to it thinking, wait, this is astonishing. Some sectors, job vacancies are down 50%. Overall, year on year, job vacancies are down 18 or 20%.
Yep.
And there are certain sectors where the vacancies are up and they can't fill positions. And I cannot find it reported anywhere.
No, well, nobody wants to have that news out and about.
I cannot find it reported anywhere. And I can't remember which day it was. Otherwise, I would have got the clip out and played it on BBC Sounds. I would have played that clip because that's what feels like is really happening. out there.
Well, and the problem is, with the exception of things like that, where you actually have somebody who has visibility of the stats going on Radio 4 and talking about it. I mean, yes, bear in mind my background was IT for 25 years. I have a number of colleagues. It feels a bit like 2007, 2008, where actually people had the highest wages. I remember getting big pay increases in 2008. And then by the time we got to 2009, 2010, suddenly jobs disappeared and people started phoning me up and going, "Oh, Alex, do you know of any work?"
Yeah.
And I'm getting that. I'm getting more people on LinkedIn, not for the commercial property stuff that I'm doing now. Those guys are all busy as hell. I mean, we've got a problem in most of those projects in that we can't get the dedicated consultant teams that we need. But in the IT side, yeah, I'm getting the same rumblings that I was getting in 2009, 2010 from people who only a year or two ago were telling me what great pay increases they had. But that's anecdotal. I mean, what do I know? That's how it feels. Just like to you, you're hearing about it, you can see these things, but then you go out in the evening in London and it's packed. The restaurants are busy again. They appear busier now to me than they were 6 months ago. The last 3 months, people have just gone, sod it. Can't be bothered anymore. I'm just going to go out and have fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. I mean, so a lot of especially more recent followers I think, what does this mean? I mean, someone just asked in the comments, so does this mean should we buy now? Is now a good time to move? So Shakil Ahmed has said, is now a good time to move? Now, it depends. This bears repeating every time. Do you need to move? What's your financial position? Are you moving for non-financial reasons or are you moving for financial reasons? It is in terms of the sheer difficulty of getting deals done over the line, it's a very difficult time to move if you are selling and buying, because transaction times are very, very high at the moment. It's taking on average, according to Rightmove, 7 months from a house going in the market to actually exchanging. And of course, no one experiences the average. People are either better or worse than average. But if you're thinking about buying for the first time, even today's Bank of England data doesn't change this fact that real house price growth, and in fact, Richard Donald from Zoopla shares this, right? He doesn't see any nominal house price growth for quite a few years.
Yeah.
There's no real house price growth. So if you're buying a home to live in because you need somewhere for you and your family to live, and you found one you can afford and it's not overextending yourself, always, always, always buy a home, because it's better than not having one. You cannot get on with your life. But if you are a buyer thinking that, well, it says my pension, I'll buy, and the increase in the property value is going to make it worthwhile and pay for the maintenance and everything else, that, in my opinion, right now would be a severe miscalculation. And I saw someone say to me just this week, I would rent, even if I could buy, I would rent because I'm then insulating myself from dilapidations, maintenance costs, that kind of stuff. And I would invest my money elsewhere where there is a better return than the housing market. And I thought to myself, that's a very compelling viewpoint to consider. Again, this will be affected by whether you're buying a brand new build or an old one. It depends on the quality of it. It depends on the structural state of it. All these things. If you get a house that's stood for hundreds of years and is just obviously going to stand for hundreds of more years, with minimal maintenance, that's very different from buying a house which actually after a few years you're going to need major maintenance on it all the time. And we all know people, well, I know people who just get sick of how their homes cost them endless amounts of maintenance money. And the number of first-time buyers who think rent is this much, mortgage payments that much, that's cheaper. That is the most naive mistake you can make, because, honestly, I think even for a typical ordinary average home, you need to be budgeting between 5 and 10 grand a year for maintenance. And if you don't, the actual relative value will decrease because of its condition, and you will have horrible maintenance problems if you get behind the maintenance rather than staying in front of it. Yeah. Interesting times. Alex, Anything you want to add?
Not really. I mean, if anyone's got questions that they'd like answered, I can't see. I don't know what's happened with your question bit, but I can't see them at the moment.
I can see the question. But yeah, there are no relevant questions here. Lots of comments, lots of chat, but no relevant questions. Abigail Smith, I'll put it on screen for you. Inflation is going up forever because of money printing. Money printing is set to continue because massive government debt. Right. Inflation does appear to be something that's going to be staying higher for the foreseeable future. But they stopped printing money here a couple of years ago now.
Yeah, we've been doing quantitative tightening for some time, and reduced the amount of additional QE style money circulating. I can't remember by how much. But it's
Are they printing in America?
Sorry?
Are they printing in America, or have they stopped printing there too?
I don't believe so, but they keep making funds available, which is not quite the same thing. But you know,
it's funny because when I posted that Bitcoin comment on X, you're right, it did trigger a lot of crypto bros. It got very angry with me. I think Bitcoin is as worthy a gamble as any asset class. That's why I placed my bets back in 2017, and I think there were because of the psychology around it. It's definitely going to continue, and it will have its ups and downs. It's going to be more volatile than gold, I think. I don't think, for reasons you've explained. Sorry?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
It's going to be more volatile than gold.
Yeah, it's going to be more volatile than gold. It's not going to end up becoming the global currency that we all end up using to spend in the shops ever, for reasons you've made clear.
Yeah. And it will have a very interesting time if central bank digital currencies are adopted globally. Yeah. That will be the crunch point. I mean, let's face it. One of the reasons, I'm not suggesting it's a conspiracy or that it's the main reason, but one of the reasons that central banks and governments are looking so hard at CBDC is because Bitcoin in particular and cryptocurrencies in general concern them, because control and taxability should be asserted from a centralized government in their view. So, you know, this could be the last gasp for central banks. Either central banks will lose and cryptocurrencies will work with retail banks, and you know, that's the way we'll go, or centralized control will remain and in fact get much stronger. And I would expect to see, as I've said before, eventually central bank digital currencies will take over any need for commercial and retail banking, and all that we'll be left with is private banking and, you know, the guys who are doing your broking.
Yeah, I mean, so I am not for or against it. I find it fascinating. Cryptocurrencies going to be volatile. There are some people who made a lot of money out of it, and they're going to be able to buy homes because of it. There are people who feel that it's important to hold cryptocurrency because it'll hold its value better than our normal fiat currency that is being devalued constantly. Which, you know, I don't disagree with that latter part, but I don't think you can say that crypto is going to be more stable. Right.
Yeah.
You know, if I don't have opinion, but if there is a crypto crash, it'll be a god almighty one.
Yep. Oh, there's a question from Rick's G. And it's a very...
put up there.
It's a very simple answer. You wanted to buy your house roughly sometime around the late 70s, early 80s, and you wanted it to be mortgage free and not give a damn about it by 2007. But actually, anyone who purchased after 2004 really missed out. That was when things started to get nasty. Since then, if you wanted to buy and be successful, you'd have bought in 2013 was your optimum time in terms of value. People will say, no, it bottomed out in 2009. Yeah, not in real terms, in nominal terms, perhaps. In real terms, as in what you could then buy once you sold your house, you want to be buying in 2013. But the increase from 13 to now is tiny in comparison with a person who bought between 80 and from 80 and sold in, say, 2007-8.
And for those of you listening on audio podcast, that was in response to a question where Rix G asked, I keep being told by baby boomers that houses double every 10 years. Are you able to work out when that started and stopped? So that was the question that Alex just answered. Here's a question. Ranveer Singh says, so essentially this new BOE data has made you question your 35% prediction, but it's unclear if this is a blip. Is it fair to say next quarter's BOE data will determine if you revise your prediction? Certainly the continuing trend over the next few months, if it continues up like that, would cause me to rethink it. Yeah, it definitely would. But you know, the fact is this: my 35% number is an average. It's a national average, more for England and Wales and for Scotland and Northern Ireland. But again, nobody will experience that average. There are places where there are properties that have already come down more than 20%. Right at the higher end of the market. In the parts of the country, the biggest falls, basically in the southeast, and now more and more in the southwest as well, there are places where properties have already, some properties of certain types in certain places have come down over 20% already. That doesn't mean the news because it's highly regional. There are places where that's already happening. There are places in the country where prices have not stopped going up over the last 3 years. There are some places where certain property types have continued to go up and up and up and up. And so, if and when, well, let's see what happens, right? I'm basically putting a pin in this one and going, this is the first time since I made that expectation a couple of years ago. This is the first time it's made me go, ooh, that feels different. And I want to spend some time getting to the bottom of it. Now, listen, actually, Alex, I'm sure you have. I've got an appointment in 5 minutes for me to get ready for. It's been brilliant. Thanks, mate. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining.
Pleasure.
And for everyone else, I'm planning to start doing a regular, just a Q&A, a movers Q&A, because I'm here more to help you with your moving questions than I am with endless house price prevarication. Talking about averages that don't affect anybody.
Yes.
Thanks, Alex. Everyone have a good weekend.
And you.
All right. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.